Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude at Beyond Mystic, and welcome to this recurring episode of Galactic Download with our friend IndigoAngel. Of course, you can find her work at IndigoAngel222.com is her website, and you can also find her at IndigoAngel on YouTube. Let's give her a big warm welcome. Indigo, how are you today?
I'm good, Jean-Claude. Thank you for having me here. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you back. Last time we had you on, you were in Egypt live. We could see the shot of the pyramids in the background, and that was really amazing for the audience to see. So why don't we start the show here today? I know we have quite a few topics, and I'll bring that up for the audience here. But why don't we start with a quick, I guess, update from you, or maybe recount from you of how you finalized your trip in Egypt, and maybe how that relates to the conversation we're going to have today about some of these stargates.
Yeah, so I spent about 6 weeks total, and I was there really learning a lot about the grid structures and the Stargate there, and really tuned into the geometry and the solar codes because it is so close to the sun there. So it was really spent a lot of time attuning myself to a lot of that information and getting a lot of downloads, and brought back a lot of information and a lot of new perspective. And it was a lot of fun. It was a really good time. But I'm happy to be back. I'm very happy to be back home and getting to apply the things that I learned from Egypt to what I'm currently still working on.
So let's get into that a little bit. First of all, yeah, back home in the big turmoil of things, geopolitically, of course, there's a lot of changes going on. And it was funny, too, while you were in Egypt talking about some of these portal energies activating, you were also indicating that we would probably hit even more turmoil here in North America as a result, maybe to some of these energies coming in. Do you want to maybe touch on that a little bit, just to remind the audience here of what you were talking about and how you saw some of these energies maybe be affecting the outcome here of the population on Earth?
I think that the main thing that I took note of was the Aquila grid network. So it is pertaining to the Atlantean Aryan control networks that overlay the organic grids, and how a lot of these control systems are still implemented today. So that was one thing that I was actually studying there. And yeah, it was very eye-opening. Definitely in Egypt, COVID was not as much of an issue. The country was very open. They weren't applying such hard restrictions in terms of mask wearing and things you could and couldn't do. The country wasn't necessarily on any type of lockdown. And so it was definitely very eye-opening to go from having a lot of freedom to kind of coming back to experience all of these regulations because of COVID. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's definitely one way that I think it's impacting the globe, is that we have so many different standards, and from county to county, from state to state, from country to country, that nothing's very organized. So it does cause a lot of distress in terms of travel, especially if you're trying to travel during this time. And so, I mean, in terms of things that are mainly going on, like with society, I think that's the main thing that I kind of noticed.
Very good. Sorry, I'm losing my voice here today. Very good. I have up on the screen here for the audience to see. These were the two live episodes from Giza. I think one was from Giza and the other one was Heliopolis. So people can go check that out on Beyond Mystic on our website. The videos are still up there. And what was fascinating to me about these two episodes too is that a lot of the information you were talking about, and of course you have your own research and nomenclature. A lot of it stems from maybe some of the Oceana Dean material that's quite old, but you've also basically made it your own, and you've created your own brand here of research and of Galactic Download. And that's why I like having you on, because you have a very unique way of explaining the things that you are understanding here as it pertains to this grid network. And what's fascinating about your work, whether you know it or not, is that it also coincides with some of the work that Florida Maquis has been doing. So over the last year or two, I've got two of his videos here, but this one mainly I think is the one you would want to see for the audience. He's been uncovering some ruins of pentagon shapes around the planet, and discovering how they're all actually aligning and pointing to each other. So it's very fascinating to see. And what he was surmising in some of his research with his audience is that there was originally maybe an endogenous grid or network on this planet, and now it's kind of been overlaid by something else that might be nefarious. So that ties in a lot with the work that you're doing as well, the work that maybe Carrie Cassidy has uncovered, interviewing a lot of other guests as well. So there's more here to this story, and quite fascinated to have you back on and to discuss that. So we're going to get into the maps here as well today, and I think we're going to keep that portion for the second half of the show, where we're going to bring this to Patreon. So for now, got a few comments here. Hi everyone on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us live on the show here. Somebody's asking you, do you recommend the trip to Egypt right now? Did you love going there? Like, just maybe speak to that level a little bit here for this audience member, and then we'll get into our topics for today.
Oh yeah, it was absolutely great. I had the best time. It was very eye-opening. I got to go to a lot of places. The pyramids were still open. Saqqara was open. I got to do a trip to the Great White Desert, had a private trip out there, and created a really incredible, amazing Ashera invocation with one of my good friends who flew out from Poland to help me film the video. So I have that up on my channel as well. It's called the Ashera invocation. And yeah, everything was still open. Everything was still alive. It was very community-like. The most difficult part was probably that English is just not their first primary language. So, I mean, just getting through the language barrier was probably the most difficult aspect of the trip. But other than that, they celebrated me being there. I got a lot of assistance. Everybody was very kind. So, I mean, I think it's a good time to go if you're looking to kind of release some of the stress, because there is a density that's over the countries right now that are on lockdown. You know, it energetically, how much it's really actually affecting us. You don't really realize it until you remove yourself from it, and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, I can breathe again. I cannot think about some of these stresses that are as tense here in the United States. So yeah, I would definitely recommend going at this time. And just, you have to get that PCR test before you go. That's the unfortunate thing about it, is you have to go get the test.
There are certain things that you don't have control over.
Yeah.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Carrie Cassidy is doing her annual trip to Egypt this year again in April. So if you guys are interested in that, maybe go check out her website. But I'm not sure that's confirmed yet, but go check her out at projectcamelotportal.org, I think, or .com. So anyways, let's go back here to the topic list for today. We're doing that now, this little recap on your Egypt tour. You wanted to talk about today, December 21st and 2020 solar flash. And it's funny because in my shows with Solretta from Australia, she's also been talking about December 21st here, and the natives over there are speaking about this big event coming up at Uluru, which is one of those sacred sites there in Australia. And she was on this last weekend on a show talking about this as well. So there's a lot of information there. So I think my audience will be interested to seeing or to hearing your point of view on that. And once we've done that, number 3 here, we'll get into some of your predictions in terms of Black Swan events, maybe for 2021. And then from there, we'll move over to Patreon, and we'll get into these, sorry, just a little bit typo here. Oh no, Stargates by country map that you've created here. So that will be quite fascinating for the second part of the show. Funny, you were talking about Egypt as well. Just last week, I had an interview with Mariam Hanine. She's an investigative reporter, and in her youth, she did a documentary on the Ark of the Covenant, and she was traveling through Egypt to discover some of the clues to all of that. And so I played some of those clips from our old documentaries like 10 or 20 years ago. And I just woke up this morning and I got a strike because, of course, of copyright infringement. I'm like, I'm talking to the author of the documentary, and of course, I still got a strike for it. It's quite fascinating to see here the censorship on YouTube. But anyways, all right, so let's get into, let me see if I can bring the other stuff back up while we're talking here. Okay, so you want to get into December 21st here. And first, maybe backtrack a little bit and let the audience know why you think December 21st of this year is important. Who else is talking about this and why they're talking about this? Like, where is this whole narrative of 2020 on December 21st coming from? And once we've got that, we'll get into your interpretations, your visions of the solar flash, etc. Let's start there.
Okay, sure. So yeah, December 21st, 2020, it's predicted to be the day of the great solar flash. I mean, every year astrologers are kind of talking about this. Spiritually attuned, spiritually aligned people are bringing this information up. So you can really find a lot of articles, a lot of YouTube videos about it. And some of you may already know about it, but if you didn't know, the solar flash, it's considered like the rapture or like a great soul harvest and Armageddon. It can be considered like a judgment day, and it's spoken about in a lot of religions and revelations. And it's kind of where we merge galactically with the time waves of prophecy. And so it's basically spoken about every year. Astrologers try to predict the coming of this day. And it's supposedly destined to happen in the next decade once like a sufficient mass amount of humanity has like awakened and breached this critical threshold in their levels of consciousness. And it's like a massive burst of cosmic waves that are transmitted from the central sun, Sagittarius A, from the black hole, from the center of our galaxy and through our sun. And it's supposed to appear as like a milky, warm liquid light. And if you're in tune spiritually, if you're in tuned energetically, metaphysically, you will kind of experience an instant evolution or transmutation of two strands of the double helix, going from the DNA carbon-based life form into having like a crystalline life form, having a light body. And so it will just affect you differently depending on which level of like an intermolecular evolution that you're on in terms of your ascension. And so, yeah, so the sun's currently, it's on hyper eruptions. There's a lot of solar flares. There's a lot of coronal mass ejections. And I believe we just had like some major eruptions from two major sunspot areas. I just kind of seen something the other day.
I believe last Monday or Tuesday, we were going to be hit by one of the biggest in a long time, and they were expecting some electrical disturbances across the planet. And just doing videos and hearing back from some of my audience, I've heard quite a few people saying their electronics were acting weird on that day too. So there is something to it. And of course, this whole year, maybe it's leading up to this December 21st. I mean, like you say, astrologers have been trying to pin this date for a long time, and so far they've missed the mark, but that doesn't say that it might not be this time around. We have indications now again that there are, like you said, there is a lot of activity, not just in the solar flash, but also in the reports of our magnetosphere. So even there this year, there's a lot going on. That seems to show that there's interference, at least with our magnetic field. And of course, humans, I think, are feeling that. And thus goes back to the Webbot reports where, you know, people were getting basically the sun disease, but basically they were affected by the sun and by virtue of the light here. So this is what you're talking about. So I think it's quite fascinating. Do you want me to bring up one of the slides you shared with me before the show? Is this the time here for the
yeah, you can go ahead and bring that up. I think what I was going to add is that I do believe this year there's definitely an increased intensity to this because of the Jupiter and Saturn conjunction. So it's kind of a rare event where Jupiter and Saturn conjunct the sun for the first time since year 2000. And Jupiter is essentially, it's like the largest planet in our solar systems. It's considered the king of the gods, king of the planets. So it has such a massive gravitational force that it actually pulls on our sun, and it pulls it out of its very center. So the sun actually has its own like rotational alignment that it kind of follows in its center. And Jupiter is the only planet that actually tugs on it. But this year we have Jupiter and Saturn conjunct at the same degree. And so it's definitely going to, it's actually the meat and potatoes of this event this year, December 21st, 2020, on the day. So this astrological alignment that you see up here is the astrology for December 21st, 2020. So the tugging of Jupiter and Saturn in this conjunction, it really could be the force that initiates those solar flashes, any coronal mass ejections. It would definitely propagate this. And not only that, it opens up time portals. It opens up time vectors and time merges. So it opens up, you know, passageways for souls to seed and incarnations. It actually wouldn't even be a very good time right now to maybe even take a flight, because when you go up in altitude, it could, during this alignment, it could actually pull a plane out of altitude because of the gravitational force. And if that happened, you might even enter into a time warp where you are just suspended in time and you wouldn't even come back until the next conjunction, until that portal is allowed to reopen up again. There's actually stories of this. I think there was like a flight in France and a flight in Malaysia where they were suspended in time and didn't come back for like 18 years, but it had to do something with the monotonic cycle of the moon, because the moon also has this effect on the sun as well. But Jupiter would even have a greater effect on the sun. So that's kind of interesting. So maybe
you just blew my mind there. You just blew my mind on that. I didn't know of the two flights you're talking about, but of course we've had similar stories to this throughout our history, whether you're talking about the Bermuda Triangle or, you know, the Alaskan Triangle, or there's one in the I think between China and Japan also. There's a lot of stories about this. It's hard to pin down really where they're coming from, but that's quite fascinating. I'm curious to think also, like Penny Kelly also, somebody just brought it up on the screen. Let me see if I can get the comment. M. Lansing is saying, I think Penny Kelly talks about a micronova or something like that. So she's basically, Penny Kelly in the micronova narrative is talking about basically the sun sneezing. So, or it could be another star that's bursting. So in your particular understanding of it, may I ask you, do you see that as the galactic central sun sending a pulse throughout the network, hitting our sun, which is kind of connected like an IP, network IP kind of configuration, and then our sun would respond to that and also discharge? Is that what you're seeing? Or are you seeing something else coming maybe from the galactic center, as maybe Dr. Paul Laviolette was reporting, I think in 2010 or 11, and he called it the galactic superwave that was coming and that astrologers had tuned into. So how do you break that down for the audience?
I would say definitely the solar flash is predicted to come from the grand central sun or from the metagalactic core. That prophecy comes from the core of the universe. But in terms of this event for this day, that's a potentiality, but then you have to also think about the planetary bodies and how they're affecting the sun as well. And so that's kind of like I was bringing up the two giants that are coming in conjunction, because this actually, Jupiter and Saturn haven't come into this alignment since the year 1623.
Somebody else is saying John is maybe backing you up here, and John, maybe you can give us a little bit more details as to the source. But he says, I read this, only Jupiter and Saturn every 20 years or so. Yes, but the last time it was this close was March 4th, 1226.
Okay.
So John, if you have a reference source to that, please put it into the chat here and we'll share it with the audience. If it's a URL, maybe just cut and paste it into my Twitter account, and then from there I'll grab it and put it here for the audience. But nevertheless, there seems to be something happening here too. I mean, I had the astrologer coach Sonia Francis on a couple of weeks ago, and she was also talking about these alignments being extremely potent, and she talked about these basically cycles, and we're at the end of this 20-year cycle, but we're also at the end of another cycle which started basically at the end of World War II. And I reminded her that, you know, that's the cycle where we started this Bretton Woods financial system agreement, and of course here we are at the same time, the IMF telling us that, yeah, Bretton Woods is dead now, and we're looking at Bretton Woods 2.0. So the closure of that cycle, is not just in astrology, it's happening here on Earth in terms of real life events. You can kind of correlate things that are happening. And then she was talking about a much, much older cycle. And I'm not sure if it's the one that John is talking about, the 1226 one, or maybe even older than that. So that's quite fascinating. So let's get into...
There's definitely simultaneous running cycles, and some of them are merging together and, you know, having time merges and they're coming together. See, this was my prediction. So if you look at this astrology here, what's interesting about it is if you look at Jupiter and Saturn, where the little red arrows are, they're both aligned to 29 degrees of Capricorn. And this aligns to the star system Cygnus. So Cygnus is from 27 to about 29 degrees Capricorn. And my prediction is that this may not...
Hold on for a second here. My dog is going ballistic. I'm going to put my mic on mute. I'll go check out, but keep going here on this particular thought. I'll be right back, okay?
Okay. So my prediction is that it may not only be the force of the great solar flash, but that we'll also be experiencing a black swan event, because Cygnus is... it's aligned to the swan. And so there's a lot of metaphysical and cosmology that comes along with this star system. It's a very highly elated star system. It's connected to the Stymphalian birds. It's connected to Vega. I believe it's the Summer Triangle, and also Aquila. And the Atlantean, Aryan, Aquila grid networks are just, they're really lit up at this time, and it's kind of what we're going to talk about when we go over to Jean-Claude's Patreon, is how these Aquila grids are interlapping with this. But essentially, they're both aligned to 29 degrees of Cygnus, the swan. So I've been seeing the black swan for a couple months now, and I couldn't understand why. I keep having these visions of the black swan. What does all of this mean? And so I was looking into it, and the black swan is actually an unpredictable event that is beyond what a normal expected situation could be, with potentially severe consequences. Black swan events are characterized by extreme rarity and severe impact. COVID-19 was a black swan event. World War I, World War II, these were all black swan events. 9/11 is considered a black swan event. They're just events that are unpredictable, with severe results and widespread global consequences. So I don't like to be like, oh, the bearer of bad news, bad things are going to happen, you know, because there's a lot of positive aspects to Cygnus as well, that the cosmology, it could be, you know, a good event, it could be a positive event, but it's definitely going to be something that, if, you know, it would be affecting everyone globally. It could be seen as like a negative force, but it could also be positive. It's just kind of your perspective and how you know, ultimately see things. But yeah, black swan events are notorious for global impact. So I'm kind of predicting that 2021 will be the year of the black swan events, kicking off in December, because it's aligned to that 29 degrees Capricorn, both Jupiter and Saturn aligned to Cygnus. And, you know, as we go through December, we're clearing a lot more planetary shadow. Every year we kind of dip into these like underworld experiences where everything merges, collective shadows exposed. And it just becomes more intense as we get closer to that galactic center because of all of that gravitational force. So there's just a lot of major concerns, I think, overall, that could be leading up to black swan events. You know, there's the concern of our relationship, US and China, trade wars, that's moving towards relative hostility. You know, we have US constitutional crisis and civil unrest.
We do?
Here in the States, we have a lot going on. Oh, are you being sarcastic?
Of course I am. I just wanted to chime in and let you know I was back and my microphone was on. So please go on.
You know, we have our new waves of anti-globalization. And then, of course, we have all of the probabilities of global natural disasters, particularly California. You know, so there's just a lot going on, you know, and so I think we're kind of looking at everything that's happening, 2020 being the year of like watershed moments, meaning that it's like marking the division point between all of these transitional phases.
Thank you for that. And I missed part of the end here of the zodiac alignments you were showing here, and that's okay. We don't need to recap it for me. But I did hear you talk about Black Swan events, and I think you triggered just about every censorship algorithm word there in that last word. So hopefully for YouTube, of course, this is a LARP, a live action role play video, and nothing we say is real. We're just pretending here in this particular live stream. So right. So we're just having fun here. Where do I want it to go with this? I guess I'd like to get into some of this Black Swan, maybe your visions as to what might be occurring in 2021, and you say the start of it, or the kickoff date here is December 21st. And oddly enough, again, there's things happening in the world right now that also tend to support what you're saying. I'm not sure if you've seen this, and you and I didn't have time to really talk about it too much before the video started here today, but Archbishop Vigano did an address about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago now, where he's talking about essentially the New World Order taking over the planet, but also taking over the Vatican. And he was calling out, and I won't say the names here because Google or YouTube will probably say it's hate speech, but he's calling out some of the big names that you guys are all very familiar with as being part of this conspiracy to overtake not just the world, but also the church. And what he was describing in that video is that we are currently under the rule of the anti-church. And I mean, this is fascinating language from a person that high up in the structure of the Catholic religion to be coming out and saying these words. And what was fascinating about his speech is that he did talk about the great sign in heaven. And he's going to astrology here, and that was precisely concordant with some of the Nostradamus prophecies. And so that would have happened, and I don't have the dates in front of me here, but a couple of years ago, which was the kickstart to these, I think it was the 7-year tribulation period. And of course, going by that calendar, the Great War in Heaven, as described by Nostradamus, would be starting in March 2021. So, and that would lead to basically, again, in biblical terms here, the Antichrist coming to town and ruling for a little bit here. So that's from the religious narrative. But still, there's pieces from everybody here pointing to something quite incredible starting in 2021. And if 2020 is any indication of how crazy things can be on this planet and how it can change, you know, from one day having a normal life to the next day wearing a mask and not being able to go to a restaurant, not seeing your family and all that, like, it's incredible the amount of change that we've been enduring in 2020. So you can just imagine maybe what's up their sleeve for 2021. So I wanted to say that because I think for the audience, there's an important part there, and this is what I try to do here at Beyond Mystic, is get all of these pieces of the puzzle, even if sometimes some are weird, some I don't understand, some I don't agree with. I try to kind of keep them all in the picture so that eventually I can form a puzzle, or I can have a better picture of the radar. And when you see the Vatican coming out like that too, and again, coinciding with a lot of these Nostradamus prophecies, I was like, oh, okay, I'm paying attention, I'm listening there. So I think, like you, 2021 is a year of extreme change. And all this, again, is also tied into the grids, the networks. The impact of these changes are different from area to area, and it depends how close or how far you are to maybe some of these ley line or node points on the planet. And I think this is the conversation you and I are going to have on the second part of the show. But before we get into that, do you have any comments on Archbishop Vigano, and even if you haven't seen his speech, but just on the concept there of the Vatican having this type of, I guess, infighting at this level, at this late stage of the game, and what that might mean for humanity?
No, I haven't personally seen what you're talking about, but I've always felt that, you know, the Vatican, that the Catholics, that it's more of a draconian underlying genetic to it, and that the 3 Abrahamic religions, or the descendancy from that, would be Anunnaki, and that there are these hybridizations that are definitely playing out within the bloodlines. They're playing out within the genetics of the beings who carry these cellular memory to these parts of themselves. So there's a lot of interdimensional war, I think, playing out, a lot of bloodline war that's playing out within people's own perceivability within their self. And so, yeah, I mean, it's all definitely interconnected. And I think it would just be smart to really keep an eye on the warning signs and these things that are leading to the peak of these potential black swan events at the end of the day. Because, I mean, we can sit back and say, oh, we never seen these things coming, but did we really not see these things coming? You know, I mean, there's a lot of things that do kind of allow us to be able to kind of see the silver lining of things. And so, you know, it's just about being prepared, particularly with natural disasters at these times. Just the force of one earthquake and the slipping of a tectonic plate could bring on the craziest tsunami that would just completely wipe out the entire country. So
I agree with you. There's always, if you're paying attention, that is, there's always warning signs. But for a lot of the population who, you know, are on the treadmill of going to work, you know, every day, watching their football, drinking their beer, taking their medicine, watching mainstream media, they may not be aware of the signs simply because they're too busy to see it. But for people who research and pay attention, and for people who are more sensitive maybe to some of the other realms in terms of downloading and decoding some of this information that is non-local to us, but still accessible to us. There's a lot of proof to this, whether you talk about remote viewers or psychics and all that. So I don't want to get into a debate of clairvoyancy or clairaudiency, but to the point is there are signs. And right now, to me anyways, this sign of Archbishop Vigano having this discourse with humanity at this time, to me, was absolutely fascinating. I'm bringing up the slideshow or the poster for his video, and I think what I'll do here for your sake, but also for the audience who may not have seen this already, I'm also going to share the link to this video address in the live chat so people can go and watch that. And I recommend you do. This is an hour address, and you might have to pause and rewind a few times because he has a thick accent, but fascinating stuff. And then if that's of interest to you, I'm also going to show you this decode by a fellow Canadian, Naughty Beaver. This is his website here, YouTube channel. And in this particular episode, he goes into correlating everything Vigano said with what he's been saying about the Hopi prophecies, and also how that's conjuncting with Nostradamus. Again, fascinating video. This one also is an hour long, but it's just a big piece of the puzzle. And a lot of this has been obfuscated to us by the mainstream narrative. We don't look at the skies anymore. Of course you do. People who do astrology and all that, they do. But for most of humanity, they've been disconnected from this world of information. So let me share this link also with the audience here. That's not the right one. Sure.
I definitely think there's a heightened sensitivity too with all of this as well. I think another thing that kind of came to my attention the other day as I was looking at Hypatia. Have you ever heard of Hypatia?
No.
She was a Platonic philosopher in Alexandria, and she was a pagan, and she was like an amazing teacher. She was the daughter of the person who owned the great library of Alexandria. And she was actually like brutally murdered by a Christian mob. And they literally stripped her naked, hooked her up to the back of a carriage, drug her body, chipped off her skin with tiles off of the ceiling roof, and burned her alive in front of the entire community. But her death, she was like the last, you know, pagan witch supposedly to have died that literally marked the era of the dark ages of Christianity.
You're raising up another point there, and you and I have touched on the subject of the rising of the divine feminine before, and you and I actually spoke about this while you were in Egypt as well, because Isis, or Mother Isis, is also very important here as it pertains to our genes. So the word Genesis, genes of Isis, is all interconnected here. And another point, if you look at this from a religious narrative standpoint, not necessarily having to be involved in the religion to understand it, we'll know that the Notre Dame a church was burning a couple of years ago, and this was also there was a very specific timing there, again, with celestial events and the rise of the divine feminine. And of course, the church, which is now ruled by the wounded male patriarchy and the system, is a symbol of that repression of the divine feminine. So when the church was burning in Paris, along with some of these alignments and some of these predictions of Nostradamus as well, who was talking about, even Dolores Cannon was talking about this, that we would get to that switch where the divine feminine would start to rise up again, and it would cause all of these basically structures to crumble, right? So this upheaval in society, and we're seeing it now. And again, this is what I mean about there's signs everywhere if you're paying attention. But if you're paying attention, and I believe Naughty Beaver also, M. Lansing says, yeah, I love Naughty Beaver. He does great work. He also did another one of these codes on Notre Dame de Paris, but also in relation to what Dolores Cannon was saying about how the Vatican would basically crumble from within. And all of these things that she talked about 20 years ago are happening today with all the revelations of the networks, underground networks of trafficking, and being the money system for controlling politicians around the world. Like, all of these things are coming now in the opening, and it's really from within. From within Rome, it's burning from within. So it's not being attacked from outside. It's their own sins basically that are coming back to haunt them. And so there was the whole prophecy again about the white pope, the gray pope, the black pope. Anyways, this stuff is fascinating. I could watch this for hours. So guys, we won't spend too much more time here.
And think about 70 AD, where the Roman invasions. It was like the first or the last Roman invasion where all of the true Israel Hebraites descended into Egypt, and then descended into lower parts of Egypt, trying to escape this invasion. And they entered into the Atlantic slave trade. And so the true Hebrew Israelites, the prophecy is that they're supposed to come back to Israel, but they're all scattered across the nations, and most of them don't even understand because they've been renamed through slavery. And so there's all of this is coming back up. All of this becomes so alive, particularly when going through the prophecy of the solar flash or the judgment day or the time merges of Revelation, because it's all of this war over royal lion's blood. The gold, the metal, it kind of comes back to all of that, the ancient Sumerian prophecy and history. It's a lot of
22 psychic Jenny Moonstone has also been on the heels of this track of how basically gold and silver are basically coming back into humanity's psyche to fight this fight that we're in now. We're in this spiritual war. And so she has quite a few fascinating videos with Big Swear on that subject. And if you guys haven't seen that, you can go to roadtoruda.com and have access to those. Okay, I think just to finish up on the Naughty Beaver stuff, I believe, like I said, he had also done a recent video, not just on Archbishop Vigano, but some of the more telling signs now of this election here I'm in Canada, but for the audience here in the United States, and how Dolores Cannon and Nostradamus had seen that. And again, really fascinating, and it gives you insight, because again,
why Dolores Cannon had similar predictions of Nostradamus?
She was channeling him, actually.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So that's fascinating in and of itself. It's kind of like their soul had pre-agreements when they came in here to do the work that they were doing and to stay connected with each other, even though they were living in two different time trajectories. And so again, you could probably spend 4 or 5 hours getting into that topic, and I recommend you do. I'm talking to the audience here. There's a lot of cool stuff there, and to me, it's surprising when a lot of it suddenly starts to pop up in reality on the day-to-day basis. You're like, huh, maybe these guys were onto something. And of course, in terms of Nostradamus, he was also trying to flee basically the controllers, and he would basically code his language to not get caught or not be so overt, kind of like what you and I are doing here to try to avert censorship on YouTube. We're all living that same thing.
Have you thought about speaking in code?
Right. Yes and no. Like part of me wants to, part of me says, no, fuck off. I'm going to say what I have to say. It's my show. But then again, I won't have a show if I keep doing that, because something else happened today. I got a community strike for hate speech, and it wasn't me who was doing the hate speech, but in one of my interviews with another guest, and I don't believe what he was saying was hate speech either. I totally disagree with that. But that's YouTube's way of saying you can't talk about this subject, and they've just removed the video. I'm going to be doing another video for the audience to explain that either tonight or tomorrow, because I might need to move some things around and delete maybe all of the videos from this famous guest of mine that is a recurring guest on the show. So I'm going to have to think about that and how I'm going to address that. Anyways, okay, going back to 2021 here, Indigo, before we go to our Patreon portion of the show, is there anything else you feel like sharing with the audience in terms of either visions or thoughts, or maybe information from other sources also that might point them to directions where they can study and learn more about this? Let's spend a few minutes here.
I'm still kind of studying about the Black Swan events myself. It seems like most things that I kind of pull up on it kind of go to the financial aspects of things, like financial resets, and it seems to be in the financial world is where they like to kind of quote on the Black Swan events the most, is what I'm noticing. But so yeah, it's definitely going to pertain to the financial system, economics. It's going to pertain to just really every aspect of our life. There's probably going to be something that just surprises us, just kind of like COVID did. And that might be a reoccurring theme throughout the whole year of 2021. So just as I get more information about it, I'll definitely be talking about it on my YouTube channel as well.
Very good. And so people can find you there at, let me bring that up so the people can see, IndigoAngel222.com, I believe it is. Where are you? There you go.
That's my website. Yeah, I wrote a book. I have my book on the front page. Where I teach a methodology to finding starseed origins. So it's based upon the lunar nakshatras, and it goes by the degrees, the 1320 degree system of the lunar nakshatras, because you can find all of the major starseed origins under those markers. And I think it's a really good way to go about it. I really tune into it a lot more from the lunar aspect. And it's because I've been realizing that in terms of energy seeding into the planet, that there's so much correlation with the gravitational force of the moon, at the new moon, at the full moon, at the new moon. Souls are seeding at the full moon, souls are departing. And I actually have some really cool diagrams for that. But yeah, and then there's also solar stargates, but then there's also lunar stargates. And some of those locations would be at all of the high tide locations on the Earth, where we're experiencing the most lunar energy. And so I kind of made a list on my website. There's actually an article if you scroll down. Lunar stargates, planetary locations right there. Yep. So I actually went to the NOAA and found the list of all of the high tides around the world, and kind of went through each one and kind of energetically felt through them and tried to align them according to universal stargates and occult stargates. And there's actually some really interesting, amazing locations. There's actually one in China. It would be one of the Orion lunar gates. If you keep scrolling down, yeah, we have Bay of Fundy, Nova Scotia. That would be one of the big ones. I can't remember which number. I think it's number 5 or 6.
This one here?
Yes, that one is really incredible. That's actually, they actually celebrate that in China. Hundreds of thousands of people come. They built an entire wall for this event. Every time that the tide comes in, it creates this, it's really quiet, peaceful, and then all of a sudden it's just one gigantic wave that rolls, you know, for a long time, and then comes up and splashes everybody for miles along the coastline. And they celebrate it, yeah, like it says, on the 8th month of the lunar calendar year. It's called the Silver Dragon. This would be an Orion lunar stargate. And yeah, so it's kind of a different perspective of star seedings and soul seedings through a lunar aspect. So it's definitely kind of
curious. You have a lot of stuff. You have a lot of stuff here in Canada, but they're not in my area. I'd like to go visit and see some of this stuff. Yeah, interesting. Wow. And okay, so and how does that relate to what we were talking about on this map here? So for the audience, this is the conversation we're going to get into with the Patreon audience here. Can you maybe set that up a little bit, Indigo, and let us know what you're going to be diving into here and what we're going to be talking about in terms of this particular Stargate by country map?
Okay, yes. So this is a map that I created. I looked up all of the countries by national emblem and even kind of took a look into the coat of arms. Now with the coat of arms, it would be a different map, but I basically went through all of the countries that had the eagle as the national emblem and charted those in blue. I went through all of the countries that had the lion as their national emblem and charted them in orange, and then the dragon, and then charted those in red. And then you could see I have Pegasi and then also Cygnusian as well. These would be the countries that, according to the Atlantean and Aryan control systems, which are those overlapping control systems over the organic grids that are holding down control structures globally, worldwide, through all kinds of different ways of implementing this, through military, through the government, through their UO social services, basically through all kinds of different ways. And so it was just a kind of a way to kind of chart it and then start to really dive into the information about, you know, which grid structures are the most powerful, what do they mean, like in terms of the cosmology, how it's interconnected with the cosmology. And so there's just a lot that I'm starting to discover in all of it. And so that's kind of what we would be breaking down on the Patreon.
Very good, very good. And so for the audience here, I've put up IndigoAngel's YouTube channel. And so if you want to hear more of this information and find out more of her stuff, also as it pertains to the starseed readings, but also maybe some of the J-seal removal practices and meditations and visualizations, techniques and research that Indigo is into, you can go visit her here. And let me just bring that URL down for you guys here in the live chat. And yeah, you're at 2,780 subscribers. So hopefully the audience here can bump you up a little bit here and go subscribe to your channel and encourage and support your work here. So fascinating stuff. And also getting into some of these visualization techniques and meditation techniques. Explain it a little bit to the audience here that you do have a lot of that information here on YouTube, but that you also offer this service both through your website and through your own Patreon.
Yeah, so I basically have an interactive session where we would go through an abundance of visualizations that are designed to help expand consciousness, work on your psychic abilities, work with your psychic gifts, going through grounding visualizations, just several attunements to kind of bring you into the perception of your own bioenergetic field, your own light body, how to work with this in terms of sacred geometry. How do we work with sacred geometry? You know, people study it, but then it's like, how do we incorporate this into everything that we're doing spiritually? So I work with a lot of bringing symbolism into the body and allowing those attunements to take place by visually bringing them into the pineal, running them through the body. Recently, I've been working on with the Stargate location. So that was one thing that I learned in Egypt, was I really could see the solar sacred geometry, which was octagonal, was solar octagonal. So I've been applying that to the visualizations that I've been doing on my own Patreon, where inducting the symbolism, but then running it to the sun, and then from the sun back to the pineal, and then generating those solar codes so that way your body can attune to that energy. And just kind of really taking it to the next level of self-experimentation and self-mastery, and kind of pushing past the thresholds of what you can and can't do in terms of visualizing things. So it's fun, and it's really based in energy mechanics. And so strive to really use the energy mechanics that we are working with in our own field, and how do we use them? How do we apply them? How do we awaken these dormant portions in our energy field?
I know for a fact, in high-end sports, whether that's martial arts or whatever it is, visualizing your success is a big part to your success, right? And so there is something to be said for the power of visualization. And when it comes to meditating and working with sacred geometry, IndigoAngel has really, really good videos on how to do that, because so that, especially in the sacred geometry, some of it gets really, really complex. So you really need to practice and to see step by step how to break down some of these geometric patterns and incorporate them into your field. And she did a really good job at that. And I really recommend you guys go check that out. And of course, if you need help, she can give you some online personal booking sessions to help you do that. Before we get into that, and I wanted to ask you about if you set up a discount code for the Beyond Mystic audience here. I also want to let you know, guys, this is also where most of her videos are on the Egypt series on this thing here. And you can also find them on your Facebook. I believe you've posted quite a bit, Indigo. Okay, so and in terms of these services on your website, whether that's the, I believe you and I talked about JSEAL removal, maybe getting a discount code for that. Is that active now?
I will plug that in as soon as I get off of here with you today. I will go ahead and put a discount on the JSEAL removal, which is a 15-dimensional vertical ascension column clearing, where you go through basically a lot of the biblical distortions that really pertain to the Akashic records, contracts, ancestral contracts, slavery contracts, limitations of noble desires in life, crucifixion wounds, everything that's kind of blocking you energetically. We go through and we interactively and together, we remove those from the body. The Zeta seal, which is right there on the center of the chest, that's actually one of the main blockages of the fifth dimensional perception of being able to achieve, higher consciousness. And it's one of the main blockages. And so we just go through and we remove them interactively. And we really focus on the axial tonal lines of the body. So we send light through the axial tonal lines. And then we also do a liquid light cleanse at the end to kind of wrap it all up. And then I always recommend to do a fasting with this one, particularly maybe like a 3-day fast, just to really help detox all toxins, and also to help with the emotional detoxing, because kind of when you fast and you break down that intermolecular structure just a little bit, it allows you to go deeper inside the cells of the body. So you get much deeper purging that comes from the removal as well.
What I'm fascinating about, what I man, I'm having trouble translating today. What I find fascinating about some of this work, and specifically here, the JSEAL removal, but also the visualizations of healing from within, which is where this is ultimately going. A lot of this looks a lot like some of the Taoist texts that are thousands of years old. And I wanted to say that to the audience because there's many ways to skin a cat and there's different perspectives across the world. We've all have bits and pieces on how to get to that. And this is one version. And to me, there's so many similarities with other healing techniques that I'm like, wow, it's fascinating to see. And the way you've why don't we explain that a little bit? How did you come to this particular form of JSEAL removal? Is it still attached to some of the teachings from the Guardians and Oceana Dean, or is this from another source, or is this that plus also your own? Maybe explain that to the audience.
It's that plus also my own. I actually kind of went through a string of receiving my own JSEAL removals from a couple different people, and I kind of seen how they were going about the removal, that I seen ways to better do it. I feel that the session that I offer, it's so interactive and it's so explanatory that people can really have a chance to understand what they're removing. Because I think that There's a lot of confusion when you come into it. You don't really understand like what it is or what they mean. You're just kind of going along with it. And me, I'm such a mechanical mind. I have to know everything. I have to know every little aspect in detail, why I'm doing it, what it means. So I kind of created this so that it was very informational, and so that you have a very clear understanding of what you're removing it, why you're removing it. It's still connected to a lot of the Ashana teachings as well. But I definitely take it a step further and really go above and beyond, particularly with the crucifixion wounds, and also with some of the slavery contracts, and then also starting to kind of talk about the importance of attuning to gold, and really getting into like the metal aspect of things as well.
Right. I love that, because in my series, Sacred Sex, The Healer Within, with Brianna Watson, we talk about through yoga and through meditation, basically a lot of practices to remove old programmings. And we all know, especially people who watch these types of channels, that we are constantly being bombarded by society, by religion, by politics and all that. And also we are programmed in the womb from our ancestors, not just our mother, but from our ancestors. And science is catching up to that fact now too. So when you talked about removing some of these ancient traumas, there's something to be said for that, and empowering the individual to be able to do that, and eventually being able to do that on their own, I think is the key here. And I thank you for the work that you're doing to try to bring your particular brand of magic and enthusiasm and research into this work. So so folks, I recommend you give that a try. You can do that at IndigoAngel222.com is the website address, and the discount code is going to be Beyond Mystic in one word.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, very good. So thank you so much for that, Indigo. That's great. We're about to switch over now to the Patreon portion of the show, where we're going to get into the details here of this grids, and also the Aquila grids that you've been talking about quite a bit in the last shows we did on Egypt. So folks, if you want us to join us there, you can do so at patreon.com/beyondmystic. And there, of course, you're looking for the Insider Access Pass. This is where I create additional added value content for my subscribers. And this is also where I put the videos that are no longer allowed to be here on YouTube for censorship reasons. So you'll find quite the library there of exciting material if you're not already there. And for those of you who have already joined us on Patreon, I want to thank you so much again. Especially given the information that I got today from YouTube that more of my videos had been deleted by YouTube. I really, really appreciate your guys' support over there at patreon.com/beyondmystic. So that's it for this part of the show. Thank you so much for joining us live here today. Love you guys. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And please do remember to also go and subscribe to Indigo Angel on her YouTube channel here. So have a great day, everyone, and we'll see you soon. See you in a bit. Au revoir.